Januarusi. Hot bombshell. Why did Pence really refuse that Secret Service car? Self-preservation, loyalty tested, or a far darker plot they wanted hidden? Did Pence know something terrifying was about to unfold? Explode the comments. The pressure cooker was about to explode. Right there at that rally, moments before the mob descended on the Capitol, Donald Trump didn't just nudge Mike Pence, he publicly, brazenly cornered him. This wasn't an appeal. It was a thinly veiled threat, an ultimatum delivered before the world. Listen to the chilling words he directed at his own vice president.
But first, there's a key story about January 6th that's been, to a certain degree, hiding in plain sight all this time. And we're learning more about it in ways that I think suggest something new, a newer dimension to what happened on that day. It's the story of how tensions rose between Donald Trump, the president, and his vice president, Mike Pence, as Trump attempted to get Pence to do his bidding and overturn the election for him, effectively, unilaterally, and lawlessly. Now, we know the basic facts about the moment when Pence's refusal to comply and subvert the will of the voters came to a head. But the significance of that scene has taken a much darker tone as we've learned more details about it. So on the morning of January 6th, right, Trump made one last appeal to Pence at the huge rally at the Ellipse, although it sounded, frankly, more like a threat.
Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
And so we witnessed the horrifying spectacle. The mob, goaded on by Trump, descended upon the Capitol, where they smashed their way in, desecrating the building, brutalizing police officers, a bloodthirsty horde roaming the corridors, howling, "Hang Mike Pence! Hang Mike Pence!" Some even erected a makeshift gallows, a chilling noose dangling ominously outside the building. As the mortal peril became undeniable, the Secret Service scrambled to whisk the vice president away from the Senate chamber, where he was dutifully attempting to uphold the election certification proceedings as stipulated by the Constitution and American law. Now, thanks to the unflinching reporting of Washington Post journalists Carol Leonig and Philip Rucka, we know Pence was initially hustled to his ceremonial office at the Capitol, protected by Secret Service agents, yet perilously vulnerable, as the second-floor office had windows that could be breached by the intruding thugs who had overrun the building. Pence defiantly rebuffed two requests from the agents in charge of his detail to evacuate the building, declaring, quote, "I'm not leaving the Capitol." As Leonig and Rucker chillingly recount, the absolute last thing the vice president wanted was for the people attacking the Capitol to see his 20-car motorcade fleeing in terror, a sight that would only vindicate their treasonous insurrection. The third time the Secret Service asked, it was less a request and more an unyielding command. They then moved Pence down a staircase to a secure subterranean bunker where his armored escape limousine awaited. ABC News reporter Jonathan Karl has since described the grim scene there in that subterranean chamber, as he saw it in official White House photos that Pence, to this day, has suspiciously refused to allow to be published.
He was in a loading dock in an underground parking garage beneath the Capitol complex. No place to sit, no desk, no chairs, no nothing. He was in this concrete, parking garage, and with his family, and this is the vice president of the United States, and he's holed up in a basement. One of them is his chief of staff, Mark Short, showing him his phone, and it's the tweet of Trump saying Mike Pence didn't have the courage. This is the guy who fled the rioters, and Trump is saying he didn't have the courage, and you can see it kind of looks like Pence is grimacing, but you can never really tell.
And what we've just heard from ABC News' Jonathan Karl describing those never-before-seen photos of Mike Pence on January 6th isn't just a news report. It's a dagger to the heart of American democracy, a stark portrait of betrayal and cowardice at the highest levels. Picture it. The Vice President of the United States, second in line to the presidency, huddled in a loading dock in an underground parking garage, a cold, concrete-like space with no place to sit, no desk, no chairs, nothing. This isn't a scene from some B-grade political thriller. This was the grim reality Mike Pence and his family faced, while just floors above, a mob incited by his own president was baying for his blood, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And then, the ultimate act of villainy, Mark Short, Pence's chief of staff, holds out his phone. On the screen, a tweet from Donald J. Trump, the man Pence had served with an almost sycophantic loyalty for 4 long years. That tweet, unleashed while his most loyal subordinate faced mortal danger, wasn't a message of support, not a call for safety. It was a despicable stab in the back. Mike Pence didn't have the courage. Courage? Donald Trump, safe and secure in the White House, the man who lit the fuse of insurrection, dares to speak of the courage of the man fleeing the mob Trump himself unleashed? The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated cruelty of that act is breathtaking. Carl describes Pence as, kind of looks like he's grimacing. But how can we truly know his emotion? Was it revulsion, disgust, profound disappointment, or perhaps the agonizing moment the final illusion of Trump's loyalty and decency shattered completely? So why did Pence refuse to get in that Secret Service car so vehemently? Initially, it was because the last thing the vice president wanted was the people attacking the Capitol to see his 20-car motorcade fleeing, as it would only vindicate their insurrection, a symbolic act perhaps, a desperate attempt to cling to the last vestiges of dignity for a crumbling administration. But was that all? I submit there was a deeper, more primal fear at play. Did Pence at that moment fully trust the Secret Service detail? Remember, the head of the Secret Service, Anthony Ornato, was a Trump loyalist, a man who broke tradition to move from a professional to a political role. Was there a terrifying possibility that Pence feared getting into that car wasn't a journey to safety, but a journey to being effectively disappeared, whisked away from the Capitol, prevented from carrying out his constitutional duty to certify the election? Did Pence fear that Carr was the final tool in Trump's coup attempt, a way to neutralize him under the guise of protection? Pence's refusal, particularly those first 2 times, wasn't just about optics, it was a final act of defiance, a desperate clinging to his constitutional role amidst the maelstrom. He knew, or at least deeply suspected, that once in that vehicle, his agency was over. He would be a pawn in the hands of those who might not have the country's best interests, or even his own safety, truly at heart. The image of Pence in that loading dock, reading Trump's treacherous tweet, is a damning indictment of the Trump presidency. It reveals a leader willing to throw anyone, even his most steadfast ally, under the bus to achieve his aims. It reveals the moral rot that had festered to the core. These new details don't just clarify the events of January 6th, they raise excruciating questions about loyalty, betrayal, and the fragile guardrails of democracy. Was Pence an accidental hero, a man who finally found his line after years of complicity? Or was he simply a cornered animal, acting out of self-preservation? And the biggest question for all of us watching this political drama unfold, what have we learned? Do we recognize the danger when a leader disdains the rule of law, scorns the truth, and is willing to trample even his closest confidants to cling to power? January 6th was not an isolated incident. It was a culmination, and details like these remind us that the fight to preserve democracy is ongoing. Mike Pence may never allow those photographs to be published, but thanks to courageous journalism, the story is still being told. And it's a story America must never, ever forget. Pence's grimace in that parking garage should haunt this nation's conscience, a reminder of just how close we came to the abyss. Now, I want to hear from you. Was Pence's refusal a last-minute act of heroism, or just a desperate bid for self-preservation? Was his fear of the Secret Service car justified? And most importantly, how do we ensure these horrifying scenes are never repeated? Drop your comments below.
So when his Secret Service agents, including one of them who was carrying the nuclear football with him, were chased out by these neo-fascists, and they ran down to some still undisclosed mysterious place in the Capitol. He uttered what I think are the 6 most chilling words of this entire thing I've seen so far. He said, "I'm not getting in that car."
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the precise moment where the entire sordid charade crystallized. After all the grotesque pressure from Trump and his sycophantic cronies to strong-arm Mike Pence into doing their bidding, into keeping Donald Trump clinging to power, the insurrectionist mob had breached the building. The Secret Service, in a desperate scramble, hustles Pence down into that subterranean parking garage. They want to whisk him away, to make him disappear from the Capitol. But he adamantly, stubbornly refuses to go. Why? Why would a man who just escaped the jaws of a rabid mob refuse rescue? Pence's own chief of staff, Mark Short, offers us a glimpse, or at least the official spin, on the supposed reasoning behind this perplexing decision. The narrative they push is that the vice president didn't want his frantic evacuation to become the indelible image, a global symbol of capitulation. Let's hear Mark Short's explanation.
He said, "I'm not leaving." And the reason he said he's not leaving is because he said he did not want our adversaries across the globe to see a 15-car motorcade fleeing the Capitol. I think he exerted enormous leadership under enormous pressure. And I think he, again, despite efforts to have him evacuate, he's like, "I don't want that visual for the world to see. I'm going to stay here."
Listen to Mark Short there. He said, "I'm not leaving." And the stated reason was Pence did not want our adversaries across the globe to see a 15-car motorcade fleeing the Capitol. Short then lauds Pence's enormous leadership under enormous pressure. That Pence insisted, "I don't want that visual for the world to see. I'm going to stay here." What a noble explanation, an attempt to paint Pence as a steadfast patriot, a man prioritizing national image over personal safety. It sounds very heroic, very leaderly. But should we swallow this for the good of the national image rationale quite so easily? Firstly, these adversaries Pence was supposedly worried about, would they really be more concerned about the vice president's motorcade departing amidst the absolute chaos of the world's foremost superpower's capital being stormed by its own citizens, incited by its own president? I'd argue the image of a rabid mob breaching the Capitol, vandalizing and screaming for blood was infinitely more damaging and shameful than a vice president being evacuated to ensure his safety and the continuity of government. Secondly, this image argument reeks of post-event damage control, a way to salvage some semblance of dignity for an administration that had utterly lost control and a vice president who had been publicly betrayed by his own boss. It smells like a narrative constructed to obscure more complex, perhaps even more unsettling, motivations. Could it be that Pence genuinely feared that once he left the Capitol, he would completely lose control of the situation, lose his ability to perform his constitutional duty of certifying the election? Could it be that he didn't fully trust those trying to protect him, fearing they might be acting on some clandestine order from the White House to effectively disappear him from the process? Mark Short's explanation sounds very clean, very official, but on a day so mired in chaos and betrayal, we have the right, indeed the obligation, to look beyond polished explanations. Pence's decision to stay was likely a cocktail of many things: bruised pride, a final attempt to assert his role, fear of manipulation, and perhaps a sliver of hope that he could still salvage something from the ashes of a democracy under siege. The image reason Short offers, in my view, is a very small, and perhaps the most palatable, part of a much more complex and darker story. Okay, so that's what Mark Short says, right? This is an image he doesn't want to project to the world, and so I'm going to stay here, essentially for symbolic purposes. But, Pence wasn't the only one who did not want to leave the Capitol complex that day, despite the terror unfolding. For example, Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona described another, more immediate tactical reason for staying put. And what we've just unearthed chills me to the bone, not just as an analyst, but as an American citizen. That national image excuse peddled by Team Pence for his refusal to leave the Capitol? Throw it in the damn garbage. The truth, as it so often is far darker, far more insidious. Listen to Ruben Gallego. We get on those buses. There's no guarantee we're coming back. That's not concern about optics, folks. That's the raw existential fear that a coup is underway. And if the legislators, the very embodiment of governmental legitimacy, abandon the scene of the crime, abandon the very building that symbolizes democracy, then all bets are off. Occupying the physical space of the Capitol, in Gallego's estimation, was key to repelling the coup. And here's where it gets truly terrifying when applied to Mike Pence. His refusal to leave wasn't just worrying about how the image of the vice president fleeing would look to the world. No. A much more horrifying truth is emerging. Pence was also concerned about maintaining control of the government, about the American constitutional order. His role on January 6th was to preside over the peaceful transfer of power. If the riotous mob, propelled by Donald Trump himself, succeeded in physically driving him away from the Capitol, where he had that duty, he may not have been able to return to finish the job. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is precisely how the coup would have succeeded. This interpretation, the far darker one, the more dangerous one, the wow, we came that close one, looks more and more likely as new facts come to light, particularly about the shadowy role of the Secret Service on January 6th. Consider this. On Friday, new testimony released by the committee revealed that a senior Secret Service official warned Mark Meadows of potential violence ahead of January 6th. And Hugo Lowell of The Guardian is reporting that the committee appears to be examining that very official, Anthony Ornato. A source tells Lowell that Trump gave Ornato a big White House job, Deputy White House Chief of Staff for Operations, in part because of his loyalty. Ornato previously helped coordinate Trump's infamous march through Lafayette Square for that Bible photo op, and assisted in planning Trump campaign rallies. On January 6th, he was overseeing Secret Service movements. And here's the gut punch. Carol Leonig and Philip Rucker report that while Pence was in that secure underground area of the Capitol, Ornato told Pence's national security advisor, Keith Kellogg, that the vice president's security detail was planning to move him to Joint Base Andrews. And Kellogg's blunt reply, according to Leonig and Rucker, "You can't do that, Tony. Leave him where he's at. He's got a job to do. I know you guys too well. You'll fly him to Alaska if you have a chance. Don't do it." My God. I don't know about you, but that sure sounds like a Trump loyalist in charge of Pence's security movements, attempting to help Donald Trump effectuate his coup by removing the vice president from the building where he was to oversee the peaceful transfer of power. This is no longer just vague speculation. These are pieces clicking into place, painting a horrifying picture of a deliberate plot to subvert American democracy from within, with loyal henchmen embedded in key positions, ready to obey orders regardless of the Constitution. Pence's refusal, in this context, wasn't just about image. It may well have been a last desperate act to thwart a much more sinister plan. Congressman Jamie Raskin, a key member of the January 6th committee, has laid this out with chilling clarity. What he's about to say will only solidify this terrifying picture.
The Secret Service agents, who presumably are reporting to Trump's Secret Service agents, were trying to spirit him off of the campus. And he said, "I'm not getting in that car until we count the Electoral College votes." He knew exactly what this inside coup they had planned for was going to do. This was not a coup directed at the president. It was a coup directed by the president against the vice president and against the Congress.
Pause for a moment and let that sink in. This isn't the Secret Service impartially doing its protective duty. Raskin is alleging a parallel command structure, a manipulation from within the very agency entrusted with protecting our leaders. And Pence, in the midst of this chaos, declared, I'm not getting in that car until we count the Electoral College votes. Raskin asserts he knew exactly what this inside coup they had planned for was going to do. And here is the absolute crux, the terrifying truth we must confront. This was not a coup directed at the president. It was a coup directed by the president against the vice president and against the Congress. My God, let that marinate. Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, is accused of masterminding a coup not against some external force, but against his own loyal deputy and against the very legislative branch of the government he swore to protect. This is treason at its most naked, a flagrant betrayal of the oath of office, the Constitution, and the American people. The idea that the Secret Service, or at least elements within it, could have been complicit or manipulated into carrying out Trump's orders to remove Pence from the process is a nightmare scenario for anyone who believes in the rule of law. It suggests that the deep state Trump and his fanatics always railed about wasn't some cabal of opponents, but perhaps a network of Trump loyalists willing to dismantle democratic guardrails to keep him in power. Pence's decision not to get in that car, in this context, is no longer an act of image, or even mere self-preservation. It was an act of direct resistance against an unfolding coup attempt, one in which his supposed protectors might have been the very instruments of its execution. He knew exactly. Raskin's words echo a chilling truth. Pence was not naive. He was aware of the mortal danger, not just to himself, but to the Republic. This begs the agonizing question: if Pence had gotten in that car, what would have happened? Would the count have been indefinitely delayed? Would some chaotic scenario have been manufactured for Trump to declare a state of emergency and cling to power? We may never know for sure, but what Raskin outlines suggests we were far closer to the precipice than many could ever imagine. This isn't just history. This is a dire warning for the future. If these allegations hold true, it reveals the extent to which certain individuals are willing to subvert democratic institutions out of loyalty to one man. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the recipe for autocracy. And so, that's why Pence's 6 words in that moment, "I'm not getting in that car," were about so much more than just the image it would send to the world. It appears they were about the fundamental, terrifying desire from the ex-president and his loyalists to, again, essentially, in that very moment, rupture the entire constitutional order in order to install Donald Trump by force against the will of the people. What we've just exposed isn't just history. It's a blazing warning. Was this a clumsily veiled coup attempt with Pence as the accidental hero? Or are there even darker secrets yet to be unearthed? Don't stay silent. Explode the comments. Share this video. Subscribe to Miles Vexler Reaction for more raw truth. The fight for what really happened has only just begun.